thanks to the net, thanks to people like you, thanks to everything that has gone on, there has been an ample demonstration of humanity on this planet having the spiritual awareness and the ability. Groups right now would probably make up hundreds of thousands of people who have awakened fully. I mean, they haven't just halfway awakened, they've fully awakened, and they realize that unmitigated greed is its own undoing. Only thing is, the people that are caught up in it haven't. It may never. And, the fact of the matter is, they are not an active participant. They're kind of like the people that quit a football game before it's over, go there, pay all that money and everything, then get up and leave. The thing is that there is a sense of unreality that these people have applied to themselves. These creatures have applied to themselves. And in it, there's no room for cause and effect, human decency, compassion, any of the virtues whatsoever. Everything has soured from the inside out. And I doubt very seriously that in an elite family, there are as many members that are not disgusted as there are those that are going along with this shit. You see people that have given up their place, their bunker, their billet in the underground installations because they realize they come to the... and this is what I wanted to demonstrate to everybody that has any policy-making role here and elsewhere. This is what I wanted to show. I wanted to show that even though technology has been perverted, and even though that there is a split consciousness as a feature of mankind here, that even though all this exists, there's still good, conscienced people. There are people that have spiritual awareness and spiritual side, that they can appreciate the complexities involved, that they can be taught, that they can fit in anywhere, that their children are as equal to the task as the children of anyone anywhere, and that this situation requires a lot more consideration and maybe even intervention where it didn't in the past, or where it wasn't shown in the past. And I'm not sure it didn't in the past, at least 2 or 3 instances, but it wasn't shown, and I'm going out of my way to show that. You led a pack of lies. Science tells you what something isn't, but can't tell you what it is. Now, that's contradiction, right? That's as unscientific as you can get. And you're fed this malarkey, and you learned by some of the fanciful leaps these idiots take that make no sense at all, explains nothing at all, resolve no anomaly at all, like string theory, Big Bang theory, all this horse shit, which doesn't add up to expressing resolution to a single thing. There are hosts of anomaly. Are they attacking any of them? Hell no. They avoid them. They avoid them like the plague. They avoid them because every time anything is brought up in official circles that they recognize as peer, they're embarrassed right out of their minds. You can't take a single theory that has come around the bend in the last 50 years and not chuck it full of holes. And this is the absolute truth, and it isn't because there aren't great minds there. It isn't true because the knowledge base isn't there. It's true because that science and technology have become so wrapped up in over-compartmentalization and security classifications and whatever that the right people are not getting the information they need. The people that can put things together are not getting information they need. What comes out through peer review is constrained to security measures. There are even private corporations now that are observing the same kind of security compartmentalization and security guidelines that the military does. And as a consequence, findings are made all the time that if given to the right people, the people that could put an overview together that could reach to the next level of the entire field. But if I made the corrections to the fields of science that pertain to astrophysics, that within 20 years I could have you going to the stars. That I wouldn't. There are computer wizards because every once in a while one of them comes along with this genius, and the only reason they flower is because they're hacking into shit they're not supposed to see, and they're coming up with some incredible things. But of course, what does the government go out and do? They find them, they grab them, and they say, well, you come to work to us, swear the security oath, or we put you in prison for the rest of your life. Oh, it's not fair. It's not right. It's so short-sighted. Here's the thing about Assange. Assange is one of these kids who had this ability to hack and had it so good. Maybe he was a genius, and they get their hooks into him. But he is so good that he has plenty left over. And so what he does is he builds a network. Obviously, there are more people in this than him. Because one of the things that he talked about, he said that none of this is my hacking. This is what hackers have sent me. He is under no constraints not to publish what other people have sent him. So he can get away with that. And if the government can't prove that he hacked into anything, they can't touch him. But they have no case against him when they create this phony bullshit with Swedish ladies. What they're doing is they're encapsulating themselves into their own little room. By that I mean their own limited option. And if something comes along that is outside their coping mechanism within that box, they're dead. And it's going to come. It's going to come. Now, they know there are things going on in the universe and in this solar system. They know that. They know that, and they know that it's important to know what they are, but it's not important enough to them to remove the barriers to the knowledge base that they have made and to get some of the people back they fired simply because they wouldn't go along with that fucking program. So it's a situation already that's come about. Remember, I talk about they're creating a world no one will want to live. Right now, they're creating a world in which no cogent thought can reach its full range. There are people that we know that would flower out like an orchid if they had what they need to go to that next level. And it's there. It's there. But you can't get there unless you overcome the doubt factor we all have. We all have built-in doubt factors because we've been lied to so much. We've been misled, disinformed, malinformed. We've had the whole 9 yards. If you're smart, you just can't take anything on granted. You can't take anything from anybody on face value. You think about what I tell you, and if it rings true, then you incorporate it into your knowledge base. If it doesn't, you question it. And if you don't understand it, it's not going to go into your knowledge base just because I said it, and I don't want it to. I don't want them to feel more comfortable in being able to have options they haven't got now, like removing their ass out of what they're creating. And if the monsters had the knowledge of how to navigate those back-engineered UFOs and to operate them, then they would. And so I'm not giving it to them. Well, if they had that knowledge, it'd give them an additional option of being able to establish themselves in off-Earth bases while they do their dirty work here. And I don't want them to have the illusion that they can do that, even. I want them to know that they're going to have to go deep into the ground like rats. Then I want to, whenever it's set up in prime, tell them, go ahead and do it. You'll all be in one place or several one places. You'll be, by the fact that you're there, you have lost your right to survive, and you'll be eliminated. They have to have EBEs, and what they're doing is it's just like when they put themselves in holes in the ground. When they get through with their little exploits with the EBEs, they may think that they have the EBEs under control. They don't. And when the EBEs have things the way they want it, and they've already seen this rapid reduction in the human population and so forth, The EBEs don't have a moral core. They don't understand where I'm coming from or where the EMVs are coming from or where ET's coming from. All they know is that they want to have certain things. They want to be sentient. They want to be able to have a species. And that's all they understand. And even if they acquired those things, in acquiring them, they wouldn't be EBEs anymore. But that's not possible. It's not possible. They have no genetic number, so they can't be a species. They don't have originality. They don't have science. They have technology. They know how to operate things and repair them and keep them going. That's it. They couldn't convey scientific principle and understanding to mankind on this planet if they wanted to. And so, no, they are technicians. They are for what they were designed to be, deep space exploration. And that's it. And there's nothing going to change that because that was built in. That was built in. And I just wish that the Broid had spent a little more time gathering up and getting rid of them. But I don't know what went wrong there. I just know that it wouldn't have been an intention of that civilization to have this problem, to go around on other peoples. But it came about. However, I've heard discussions in various ET communities where they look upon the EBEs as a litmus paper test for fledgling civilizations, which is easy for those assholes to do since they've gotten over the bump themselves. Maybe if they'd had this kind of contamination, they wouldn't. And they don't like hearing that from me. There's something remarkable going to happen. And when it happens, I'm praying. I'm hoping and praying that it will. And if it happens, move over, ET. You got one spectacular, splendid peoples coming in. You better move over for them. And it would be the most beautiful thing, and it's what I've been looking forward to for an exceedingly long time. I am so sick of redundance. Hell, I've been wanting to do that ever since, for a long time. I just like to go in the chambers and be like everyone else. I keep joking with myself. I may have no grounds for saying this at all. I keep joking with myself, what the hell have I done to have this damn job? Wouldn't I remember that if I had absolutely been a butt wipe, a Adolf Hitler type or some shit somewhere? I think it was just that maybe I was a spoiled, rotten kid and my parents found somebody that would take me off their hands. I don't know. I remember something like a mother. I don't remember a father, but something like a mother. And then the next thing I know, I'm on a cold floor, and it's warming up. And there's just something come over me, and all of a sudden I'm in a different reality. It was awful long time ago. That's about all I retain of it. When you watch people trying to construe ufology and anomaly research within a religious context, you've got people that are mindset, and really they're going to stand up and be on your side in a protracted fight where everything is evident, either win or die. Yeah, but, up until that time, they're in your way, they're confusing issues, they're, distorting everything, and they're trying to make themselves feel good that Christ is going to deliver them in the second coming and save them from themselves. And the fact of the matter is, in all you're getting, get knowledge. That's a biblical admonition. They haven't got knowledge. What they've got is repetition over and over again, singing hymns, reading Psalms, blah, blah, blah. What a fucking waste of a life. If you get into Buddhism, you find there's some wonderful philosophies, but there's an enrichment of thought that you can go as deep into as you want, and there's always some reward at the end of the tunnel. In Christian theology and Christian metaphysics, there isn't. It's repetition. It all boils down to, well, I know you can't jump the hurdle, but have faith. Have faith. No. The word proselyte is in the Bible. Proselyte means to convert. So if you take a child and you take them away from their normal, natural predilection to convert them to Christianity or any other belief, you are, as the Bible says, creating a child of the devil. In other words, you're reversing evolution in that child. If you read the Bible like a scholar, you're not going to be religious. If you read it like a drone, told that, and then told that this and told that, that's why the Bible is taught and not read. Well, if you just read it objectively, if you read it as literature, if you read it for meaning, if you read it clean, you won't be religious. Buddhism is a philosophy. It's not a religion on that basis. Name me one thing that Buddhism prompts you to be faithful about. There isn't anything. There isn't any. Even Zen Buddhism, there's nothing. It doesn't put any premium on just opening your mouth and taking a hook. If it doesn't ask you to open your mouth and take a hook, it's not religion. That's why I'm working overtime on you, because I want you to be religious. I don't want you to be anti-God. I want you to see the grand design of everything and how beautiful it operates, and to know that it's people's tolerance of evil that fucks things up. This helps you form a design that parallels and reflects the greater design of how the solar system's put together, how the galaxy's put together, and how the universe is put together. You know how to get rid of the limitations of time. Think beyond it. Learn what you can about galaxies if you want to think beyond solar systems and get out of their time mindset, because it's not real. So you think in terms of galaxies. Now, what are galaxies and what are their parameters? And how many galaxies are in the universe? And as your comprehension is growing with grasping on the enormity of all, in the enormity itself is the loss of time limitation. And as we near a universe, what the universe is and what parameters it, and if it expands or if it needs to, or if consciousness has anything to do with all of it. And if it does, is it the collective, or is it a supernal consciousness that designed it all? And at what point is the future the past and the past the future, and is it all at the same time? When you get into these things, they all interrelate. One makes the thoughts of the other more cohesive. That's the whole secret to it all. And the point of the matter is, it's like with a moral quandary. It's not so important that you perfectly understand it as it is that you go through the chaos of it to sort out meaning to yourself. And in so doing is where you find the community of thought and love that sentient beings share. And as that grows, you get an idea what to expect and anticipate and share what will be your part in it in the EMVs and beyond. And it's just like that at a certain point, energy becomes self-implementing. It becomes a sort of consciousness. And what you take, if consciousness is expressed as love and energy is expressed as love, then one facilitates the other and they grow. And that's part of the principle of what's behind the sun not burning out. I don't care how big something is or how dense it is or what it's composed of, it doesn't take billions of years to burn it out. So what's keeping the sun going? See, that's the quandary that science doesn't address and shirks from and hides from. And they want to limit me when I am trying to explain the new physics. They want to limit me to their faulty principle of conservation of energy, which at a very low primitive state of physics exists. But when you incorporate it with the things that are going on beyond your immediate circumstance, and you're looking at things that behave in such a way that they defy these principles, like the sun, then you better be willing to say, well, this is a theory with a limited application because it does not explain a grave anomaly that contradicts it entirely. See, that's why anomalies are avoided, because so many of them actually challenge the most basic theories and so-called principles science has erected on this planet, in which people are hanging their hat on. Well, you can make hell in a second, but there's no reason to ever punish the immortal soul. The immortal aspect of every human being and every sentient being is precious. It's precious to the universe, and it self-perfects. But, that doesn't mean that you don't want to enrich it with the knowledge base of experience. Everything has room for improvement and for extensions and expansions. And, there's always something interesting about observing how new things, new understandings, and new developments evolve. There's that same aspect to the way in which consciousness and energy can be paralleled to the way in which mortal life and experience relates to the spiritual aspect and its immortality. Well, it's kind of interesting because you would think, well, why don't we just have a spiritual existence? What defines any uniqueness whatsoever to one is the trial that the other goes through. Well, the emotions are all part of the highest form of communication. Yet, if you were never anything more than spiritual existence, there would never have been emotion. Emotion goes on to a spiritual existence because it was acquired of a mortal one. Just like the energy versus consciousness, the sun versus the false theory of the conservation of energy, doesn't have to be discussed to be understood. More importantly, you have to have emotions to even want to. A spiritual existence devoid of the trial as immortal, the tribulations, the anger, the frustrations, and all that, without any of that, without the emotional experience of all those things, there is a level of depth to spiritual existence that doesn't exist. I think it started when something so magnificent and so ponderous decided its offspring needed to share in some kind of tribulation to be grand. You can't have moral appreciation unless you know what sacrifice is. You can't have love if you don't know the other emotions. You can't draw distinctions between certain people, see their moral superiority or see their character or whatever unless you've seen the other extreme. It's hard to explain, but there are ET civilizations that are so damn boring, so lackluster, that they go out of their way to explore situations like what's going on Earth right now, simply to draw some kind of emotion and intensity into their own lackluster life. As they develop beyond that, as they acquire, they move up, there's a certain grandeur as you near that perfection, at technological perfection, to acquire a different level of manifestation or the spiritual, to contain sentience inside an energy field, to actually allow the mind to be its own integral energy, alone, apart. The difference between a person that dies, and this develops when the soul and mind unite, you have, I call them spirits. I say when the soul and mind unite, that's a spirit. You have entire communities doing it, or not communities, but, well, yeah, in some cases it's a series of planets that have the same culture, and they all go at the same time, and the point in doing that is that they stay together. They manifest somewhere. As far as I know, never in the EMV. They don't have anything to do with anyone they leave behind. I mean, with anything they leave behind. They're there. It's like I've said before, I've seen people in the sun before. And I wonder, is this them? But I've known some of these that have done this, that have aspired. I could probably, if I really tried, I could probably encroach upon their space to find out about them or something, but I don't. And when they do that, the next move is theirs. I mean, they've earned what they have. This happens. If mankind here survived, in the next thousands of years, they'd explore all kinds of systems that had just incredible workings left, like people just decided to leave, to move to this higher manifestation. Well, any time that you sacrifice your moral guidance, your moral core to something, of Christian Zionism. They sell their moral core to go along with Israel no matter what they do to their neighbors or anyone else or to our government or anything. They sell their souls. They sell their sense of human decency and everything that is attached to that, thinking that, whatever Israel does, they're responsible for completing the temple, Solomon's temple, so that we can have our second coming and be delivered. And that flies in the face of everything that God is about, that religion should be about. You do not sacrifice, and no God, no legitimate God, concept of God, or anything that any decent person would want to follow or teach their children is going to have you sacrifice innocent people for some kind of deliverance. But the Jews have everyone convinced that it's okay for them to slaughter people for the Holy Land and do whatever they want to do or have to do to expand their power base and treat people any way they want and contradict themselves any way they want and talk about everybody that's not a Jew like they were animals. That's absolutely true. I have talked to people and they say, well, you're Jew bashing. I said, no, I'm not Jew bashing. If I'm bashing anything, it's Zionists. And that's just a segment of the Jewish people. In fact, Hasidic Jews hate Zionists. And the Hasidic Jews say that Israel has no right to a homeland. There are probably more Jews that are murdered by Zionists than any other single category of people Zionists murder, with the exception of bringing down the World Trade Centers, which I have no doubt they did. When you get into that kind of thinking, it becomes infectious, and it contributed to the Gulf of Mexico debacle. When you have people that feel that anything they do in the marketplace, and no matter who it harms or how it affects an entire nation's standard of living or anything, when you have these people that think that's okay and they ought to be able to have accounts in the Cayman Islands and Swiss bank accounts, et cetera, and not in any way are bothered by the effects of their actions on other people, well, that's where that kind of thinking starts, is in ethnic racism. And that's the Talmud. The Talmud is one of the most evil teachings on the planet. If people would only read it, and then Jews will stand up in your face and lie to you. That's not in there. You read a false Talmud or something. No, bullshit. And you can take their rabbis out there that'll certify a goddamn Talmud before you read it. And then read it. Read the son of a bitch. It's the most ethnic, racist, fucked up document that ever existed on this planet. It even tells you that until a young baby girl is a certain age, you can have sex with it. I'm not making this up. I could never in a million years even conceive of such a thing. And most sick shit in the world has been passed off as prophetic by these monsters. And they're teaching that they can't commit crime against Goyim. They cannot commit a crime against Goyim because there is no such thing as crime against Goyim. You can kill them, you can steal their children, you can do anything you want to. That's no crime because they're animals. Anybody that isn't a Jew. And now there are plenty of Jews that don't go in for that shit and won't be identified with it, but they don't dare open their mouth about it because if they do, good Jewish people are under more restraints and danger to buck that system because of how it's become so fueled, not just by money, but by politics and everything else. And there's no doubt in my mind that they control both the news media and entertainment media in this country. Well, you can't find out a lot about it, a lot of truth about it without getting sick of it. But the thing is, it's not going to go away. So you may be sick of it one day and come back and they do something else. What we have is we have a president in the White House today that's purely cosmetic. He gets rid of 2 Jewish advisors purely cosmetically, but does not change the policy whatsoever, and is now considering forgiving Israel expansion that we made issues about last year. By expansion, I mean where they take homes away from Palestinians and from non-Jews, Christians, to build purely Jewish settlements. Well, that's one thing. I mean, shit like that goes on in third world nations all over the world. But they're not a third world nation and have the second biggest defense industry in the world, which we gave them, lock, stock, and barrel, along with the atomic bomb. But the real issue is that those son of a bitches contaminate governments. They contaminate and corrupt political regimes left and right. They intend and will feel that they are godly driven to start World War III and firmly believe that somehow they'll miraculously survive because they're God's chosen people. When you believe that kind of shit, when you really believe that, you're the most dangerous creature there is. If you really believe that, if you will look at the atrocities that have been committed because people fraudulently claimed that their actions were driven by God's will. That's primarily what I have against religion. This same is true within the Muslim religion. The Muslim religion has extremists that get gatherings and followings, and some of their teachings are just as bizarre. They're equivalent to the teachings that you find among the Satanists in the College of Cardinals in the Vatican. And they're there. These Zionists and Christian Zionists that are just as friggin' insane, you can't improve any situation with dehumanizing influences on your membership and on other people. It doesn't work. And that's where moral core comes in. You don't fall in for any of these traps if you have a strong moral core. And that strong moral core, the first teaching is that I will limit whatever I may be doing, whatever I may be trying to do, I will limit any harm that I do to people residual to the effects of my intentions. And if you ask me and you say, go down to this, stop this train to keep it from hitting this assembly of people, and you go down and you see that stopping this train is going to kill everybody on board, and there are more people on board than the people they're going to hit, you got a moral quandary. And maybe your wisdom results in that you stop the train or that you don't stop the train. But the fact of the matter is, what's important is that you have the quandary and you worry about it and you suffer from your decision. One way or the other, you suffer from it. And that's just part of it. There's no moral decision that ever is easy that doesn't perplex the person making it. Or it wouldn't be a moral decision. But it's not easy. You just do the best you can, and that's where empathy comes in and compassion. And everyone's children should be as precious to you as their own parents regard them. We should all feel like we're all given the pleasure and the privilege of sharing in those children. And when we feel that way, the protectiveness that comes over us is more powerful than the corruption that pedophiles and white slavers and whatever can depend on corrupting. If things were right, and they went to a judge and tried to corrupt a judge into acquitting one of their members who was involved in harming children, he'd have them in prison so fast their heads would spin. If things are right. We've had 200 years of the Illuminati running around being budgeted to create wars, to do this, to do that, and getting away with it. They constantly say when any time Israel comes up, they'll constantly say it's Mossad or it's this or it's the Mafia or whatever, when half the time, if not more, it's goddamn Illuminati. Who do you think the Illuminati work for? They work for the Rothschilds. What amazes me is that you tell them about Sfali, and you find out a year later that they still haven't watched her tapes or anything, and then when you talk to them, well, you know, Sfali is a very important lady, and that she knew that when she left, they would eventually get her. She knows that today. They've got to get her because they don't want their membership saying, well, Sfali survived, because it's just like she says. She says there are plenty of people in the Illuminati that want out. Plenty of people. And she would know because she was a programmer. Oh, they'll be disemboweled like that child that's part of it. When you're a child, she wasn't even 12 years old when she was exposed to that shit. What they're telling them and what hits so close at that impressionable an age is that this is what's going to happen to you if you ever betray the family. Well, you take their gypsy groups, their occult groups, their semi-occult groups, like Scientologists are semi-occult groups. It's a cult. But they teach very similar things, only they don't talk about disembowel. What they do is they talk about wreaking legal havoc on you. And let me tell you how that can work, because they have so much influence in the courts. Have you ever heard of the Cult Awareness Network? Who do you think owns the Cult Awareness Network in the United States? Absolutely, the Scientologists. They won it in a court suit. Lock, stock, and barrel. Now, there's a Cult Awareness Network in Australia and in Europe and different places. And the first thing, if you call them, the first thing they'll do is say, do not trust the Cult Awareness Network in the United States because it's taken over by Scientologists. I look on people like Tom Cruise as the biggest fucking idiot. And you've got them all over the place. I don't care what a person believes as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's rights and doesn't play political games and commit political assassination, character assaults, tie people up in legal courts until they have no property left and shit like that. But these monsters do. And they get their hooks into somebody. That goes to the children, too. They are a cult, a very well-entrenched cult, and they have taken their lessons from the Illuminati. In all of my dealings, I have only come across one person who was a real psychic where this ability was predictable and where they could control it, and they had the ability to teach others. They had students. There's certain people, and Maria, that's her name, and she's in Dallas. And I knew her personal secretary. And so if you could be a millionaire and you wanted to see Maria, you'd go on a calendar. Well, Maria can see you about this time next year. It'll be either December the 31st or it'll be the 1st of January. Which one do you want? It didn't make any difference how much money you had or whatever, and she charged everybody the same, and there were people that she could look in their eyes, and she'd say, I can't help you. And she'd tell Rhonda, give him his money back, send him away, don't come back. Yeah, oh, she was the real thing. I haven't heard, since Rhonda went ballistic, that's a long story. I could tell you shit. Oh, my. Oh. You have no idea how deep the rabbit hole goes. Oh, you have no idea. I've spared you a lot of it. Now, I've confronted the very worst elements that are here around me. I've confronted them. They know me. Oh, shit. And they know that I have a score to settle with them. And I will. I'm not talking about people that are just nutty or whatever and have cost me money and heartache over the years. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about evil son of a bitches like Kenneth Copeland and his brother and scum like that. They know me. They had me under surveillance. Kenneth Copeland's younger brother lived right across the street from me, keeping me under surveillance right up to the point of that siege. And then when that siege was over, he and the woman he was shacked up with left. And they abandoned the house, and it went on the market and had a HUD sign out of it. And then I started talking about something else that was highly sensitive to them. They come back, pay HUD $7,500 to move back in that house, and they're in that house about 3 weeks. And then this black helicopter that was loaned to the sheriff's office here in Tarrant County is loaned to Kenneth Copeland during one of his bikers rallies. It's running counter surveillance, and it crashes, kills the 2 men aboard. And this is right about 3 weeks after they had moved back in. And I walked over, and there was Ted Copeland, who is Kenneth Copeland's younger brother, who is a narc for the Fort Worth police. He's out washing his pickup, and I walk up to him, and I say, hello, introduce myself. I already know who he is. And he introduces himself as Ted Copeland. And I said, well, now that that black helicopter crashed out there on the property of Kenneth Copeland, maybe they'll clean that mess up. And he went white. Now, I'm looking at somebody, I'm a big man, and he's bigger than me, and half my age, and he starts trembling and shaking. Then she walks up, and she recognizes me, and she just, you know how people can dance on their heels? And she goes white, and within 10 days, they're gone. But this occult church that my ex-wife and Rick McLaren had joined while she was still living with me, they did so behind my back, was tied in with Copeland. The woman who ran it, Pat Raimondo, was summoned and back to open that church by Copeland. It was all a scheme. Not against me. It was, partly. But what was behind it was they wanted to discredit militias. They wanted to create a circumstance under which martial law could be declared. And they wanted to steal money for black ops and for the Zionists in Israel. They only accomplished that one. I took care of the other two. A Mossad expert in setting this kind of shit up was brought down from Missouri by the name of Arthur Greisecker, and the local magazine here in Dallas wrote an article on him after this was all over. He comes down and he teaches them how to set up and print phony treasury warrants drawn on the state of Texas monies that are held in private banks in the state of Texas. And so for over a year, they're running around spending these warrants, and they're running around, and anytime anybody refuses to take them, they threaten them with a lawsuit. All this time, banks are already notified about this paper and that it's no good. I have all these in a file. And I know what's going on and what they're going to try to do, and I'm working online with all these militias all over the country warning them about McLaren and that this renegade faction of the Republic of Texas is up to no good. In fact, that whereas McLaren claims to be anti-New World Order and has it on everything that he publishes, in some of the things he publishes about the issue of secession of Texas from the Union, he appeals to none other than the United Nations for resolving the issue, and the United Nations is the New World Order, thereby bringing in and setting a precedence for the United Nations to involve itself in the internal affairs of the United States. And that did it. When that siege went down and McLaren was on the broadcasting out of his compound for all these militia to come in, let's not have another Waco shit, only one carload came, and they were stopped before they got there. The feds had asked me when that siege started. I had 2 visits from, there was FBI, DEA, federal attorney, State Department, et cetera, it all came to my house, set up a video camera and audio. The first time I turned over my file, which had about 1,200 pages in it, I've still got a copy of it. And it was supposed to be on Janet Reno's desk the next day, according to them. And they're sitting on this sofa. And so I say, I said, after we had discussed a few things, I said, don't think I don't know you don't have special forces in those woods right now. And I said, and you have gunships coming out of a civil defense airport right there at the intersection of the interstate with the road that comes up from Fort Davis that are set to go, that have been running drills out there for that. Don't think I don't know that. And their eyes got real big, and they're sitting there, and now I'm talking about 8 men, and these guys are just, their fucking mind is blown. I said, look, there are those among you that are dirty, and there are those among you who are trying to do the right thing and be law-abiding by the Constitution. I said, and that doesn't mix, does it? I said, so you're going to have a very coming to Jesus situation here if you're not careful. I said, if it comes down to it, I can probably go in and quell this. Oh, but we don't know. You won't go over to the other side. And I said, have you been paying attention? Read this file. Does that look like a supporter to you? I said, and when has an ex ever fallen for the crimes of a former spouse? And I said, you owe me an apology, don't you? Or do you think we're all insane? And he says, yes, sir, I owe you an apology. This is how I handled them. They left, and after the second time they came, I was dealing with Texas Rangers. These are the elite law enforcement people in the state. And they never turned the handling of that siege over to the feds. It stayed in the jurisdiction of the Department of Public Safety, the police of Fort Worth, of Texas. That's why they waited and waited, and finally Evelyn comes out. And I called the FBI the day before they were intending to take it over and burn them out like they did at Waco, and I said, I know very embarrassing things. And I said, I'll keep quiet if no one is killed. And I said, you talk to your superior. I was talking to this agent, and I'd given him the name of the people that I dealt with, and so he was listening intently. And I just handled this well. And so that's when I knew how it was going to turn out. I knew how it was going to turn out. So they went through a cosmetic little act deal. Rick and Evelyn had kidnapped a couple and shot one of them. They had flown to Israel and sold $2.8 billion worth of those phony treasury warrants to members of the Zionist government. Those were redeemed for full face value, incidentally. Rick McLaren was given several life sentences, all of them overturned. Evelyn was given a year's sentence in a federal prison, one of these country club prisons. This is a federal prison. She served only 6 months, then came back here, went to my mother's and said that they were only doing God's work. But Evelyn was doing bad things. And I found out because there were people in that church that were telling me. I mean, just because I guess they were just sick of what they were seeing. But in the church, there was a coven made up of a certain group of the women. And what they were doing is they would get a member in, do a head job on them, and then get them to loot the husband's bank accounts as much as possible and turn over the money to Pat Raimondo, the so-called minister. And there was a case where Evelyn was personally responsible for influencing a woman to take $50,000 out of her husband's account and give it to Pat Raimondo. But the worst thing she was doing, and this is where Rhonda came into the picture. I had known Rhonda before. I didn't know that she was associated with Maria. I didn't even know Maria existed at the time. But Rhonda was a flea market dealer, and every once in a while she'd come over to Fort Worth and set up at Will Rogers' complex. There was a cattle barn there. They have a flea market in, even now. And I'd sit up there, and I got to know Rhonda. And so one day, Evelyn came in when Rhonda was talking to me, and I introduced them, and Evelyn was into candling ears at the time. And so they go off and talk, and after Evelyn leaves, separates from me, Rhonda calls Evelyn and says that she's going with this guy, and she thinks he might need his ears candled, and would Evelyn come over and candle his ears. And she makes a mistake of giving Evelyn his name, and he's a big real estate developer in Dallas. So I'm sure that the church does a quick scan on him, and off goes Evelyn. Well, a week or so later, I get a phone call from Rhonda. And Rhonda says, "How are things going on between you and Evelyn?" I said, "They're not separated." And she says, "Well, do you know that I had Evelyn come over to candle my boyfriend's ears?" And she says, "My boyfriend and I were thinking of getting married." And Evelyn comes over, and she starts candling his ears and rubbing this lotion under the ears on the throat, jawline. And I said, "Yeah, I know. I know about her method." I didn't say anything else. And she says, "I went out to get a soda or beer or something. When I came back, my boyfriend didn't want to have anything more to do with me." And I said, "Really?" And she says, "Yeah, we don't even see each other anymore." And she said, "Is there anything that Evelyn could have used on him?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Can you find out about it for me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll try." Because Evelyn tried the same shit on me. So I had a good idea where to look. I knew this kid that, well, shouldn't say kid. He was someone that I had done something for back during the Vietnam War. I had helped him get into Canada. He is a former friend of my brother, but I knew that he at present was in the underworld. By that I mean we have a gang here, a bikers gang that's the local gang. It's called the Banditos, like the Hells Angels. So he was a dog in that group. He cooked, and he kept a safe house for Banditos in his backyard. This is where they could come in, do drugs, screw women, and then leave, you know. So anyway, I go see him. His name was Bill Busby. While I'm there, his wife comes in. She's a jailer in the county sheriff's office. And I tell Bill, I said, "I want a favor." He says, "I owe you one." I said, "I want to know if there's anything you know about that you can put on a person, will go through the skin, and will entrance them to where they are very sensitive to suggestion." He says, "Oh, yeah, I make it all the time. The Banditos use it on their women." So what is it? And he said, "It's ephedrine that is laced or prepared with lithium." He says it frees the chlorine ion into the blood, which does massive brain damage. I said, "Really?" I don't make this shit up. Anyway, we discussed other things, and I found out other information that I needed that saved some children's lives. I found out about a character that I already knew about through other sources, namely those of my second wife, by the name of Theodore, who was a monster and almost a programmed assassin. He was just getting out of the joint. After he got out, the first place he went was to his wife's. And she promptly disrobed and played very seductive to him and then told him no. She had joined Evelyn's church. So he was going to blow it up, and so I took care of that, kept it from happening, because there are a lot of children that would go to that church with those crazy people. I climbed under there. He had planted a bundle of dynamite right next to the gas lines, so I stopped. I told her about the ephedrine and the lithium, but I didn't tell her the rest of it or anything. She and I were kind of running mates for a while, and then she went off the deep end. Well, I was running with Rhonda. Rhonda wanted me to get a reading from one of Maria's students, a lady by the name of Carol. So I went along with it. At the time, I didn't really know whether Maria was the real thing or not, and of course I was skeptical. I knew they existed from the deep past, but I didn't know that I was going to find one. Carol gave me a reading, and she told me something very interesting. She says, all your problems stem from one very powerful man. You know something they want to know, and it has to do with interfacing a person to a computer. That's when I knew I was dealing with the real thing. Physically, I'm human. I'm not a blonde. I'm a human. I mean, I came through the genetic thing. There's some things that my mind probably had something to do with. I do not want an autopsy performed on me, ever. I'm going to join this Neptune Society that makes sure that I'm ashified very quickly. I've, over the years, always taken a fiendish delight to say, well, what if you're really not dead? And what would it feel like to have worms crawling in your nose and up to your brain? Oh. And that's God's truth. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being nasty or whatever. I'm speaking the truth.